Episode 696 of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. We've got a big weekend of women's college wrestling coming up in Gaffney, South Carolina. Today to talk about it is the head women's wrestling coach at Limestone University, Brandy Green. Brandy, we were talking before we got started. I've known you since you were 17 years old, and now we're talking about how long it's been and how old we're getting, and it's like this is no longer a young woman's game leading the way. We're eld now. Well, I'm not a woman, but we're in that demographic now. We're like we're past our mid-30s into we're adults. What happened?
It goes really fast when you're around the things that you enjoy. I feel like it just kind of flies by. So it almost seems like we were meeting for the first time just a few weeks ago. But man, when you said that, it made me feel a little aged. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to that first year real quick, and that was when you were a junior in high school, as part of the very first junior women's group that came through in Fargo in 2002. And I'm gonna put you on the spot here real quick. How many of those champions from that first year can you remember? You were one of them, so that one's the easy one. So
I want to say Takara Montgomery was there. I want to say she was our MVP of the event that year. Gina Heiselman, I think, was
Gina Heiselman,
well.
so fellow Michigander. Actually, Takara, that was probably a different age group, but the Fargo itself, Takara wasn't in. It was the
year before.
Yeah, so 2002 is the year we're looking for. I'll just go through it, see if you remember. The names are going to jump out at you as everyone. Rachel Holthouse is the distinction of being the first one because she was at 95, the lightest weight. Then Gina Heinzelman. Then Melinda Ripley, which, again, she's always kind of my women's wrestling story because do you remember who she beat in the finals?
I don't remember who she beat in the finals, but I was definitely a cheerleader for her for many years. It was always fun to watch.
Well, she beat Mary Kelly in the finals, who had wrestled against the boys the previous couple years, the juniors and then the cadets. She had beaten a couple of the boys in the cadets. So I used that match as one that makes me realize, oh, wait, there's more than just like two really good women's wrestlers out here. It's like, who is Melinda Ripley and how did she just beat the best girl that I knew at the time? And I say girls because they weren't 18 yet. I'm not going to get on the women-girls train right yet. Amberly Montgomery, Lindsay Owens, yourself in there when you went by your maiden name of Rosenbrock, complete with 10-foot side blonde ponytail, which was kind of your look for a while. Still kind of keeping a little bit. Heather Martin,
yes,
Sammy Lang, and Alicia Mena. So that was that first class of 2002. You won it the next year as well. You were obviously one of the first class of two-timers, but you went on to compete at the Olympic trials 1 year out of high school, the very first Olympic trials. So before we get into what we've got going on, there's a select group that are still actively coaching and participating in wrestling from that group. And what do you remember about being, 18, 19 years old, going out and wrestling the very first U.S. Olympic trials for women's wrestling?
Well, I'd like to say, we obviously wanted to have this opportunity well before we got the information that we were going to have this opportunity. So for many years, as I was training, you always have that hope, at 16 years old when you're trying to train, you want something bigger than yourself. So even then, we had a lot of hope that this would be in our future. So always trying to live that lifestyle, even at 16, 17, 18 years old, well before we got news that there was going to be an official Olympic event. It was definitely a time, so we had 4 weight classes. At that time, I was like that 130, so sitting in between 121 and 138. So I had to make a decision at that time. Do I go up or do I go down? Well, I was tiny. So trying to go down is what I attempted. Didn't work out so well. So I ended up at 125 pounds wrestling 138 for that event. But it was magical. It was magical to see how far the sport had came from, 7th, 8th grade year where you never saw a female ever to having the opportunity to try to represent your country in the Olympic Games. So I would say the best way to describe it was magical to see that actually happen.
I remember that year because a lot of people remember 2004, the old RCA Dome in Indianapolis, and of course the Paulson Hall Marathon in Greco. But one of the most audible gaffes, again, Mary's name's going to come up here again, because as good as she was with the back bow, she's wrestling the artist formerly known as Sarah Falp Allen. And, Mary was really good at that bow and arrow, that back bow position. And when they stopped it, it's like she was about to crank Sarah over, and the entire crowd went, oh, why did you stop it? And it was kind of one of those moments you're sitting there going, people are paying attention to these matches, and it's only gotten better in that regard. But now you've come through, you went the Northern Michigan route, initially out of high school, and where there were very few options for women to wrestle in college. I think in that era there were probably just 4 or 5 schools, and then the Olympic Education Center up in Marquette. And you were a Michigander, so you're familiar with where to go when it comes to the map. But looking at what the options were for you, and why did you make the decisions you did coming out of high school to continue competing and give that kind of collegiate opportunity a chance?
No, for sure. So you're correct. There was just a few opportunities. And really, so right out of high school, I went straight out to the training center to Colorado and trained there for a little while. Still knew I wanted to be able to be a college athlete. First generation kid, like it was really important for me while I was going through to have the opportunity. Just at the time, wrestling, these 4 or 5 programs, the level of coaching at the time, like it was more diehard people that wanted to be part of it, opposed to somebody that can help me elevate as an athlete, as well as the partners. So you may have 1 or 2 at each college team that were really going to be able to push you, where I really wanted a room that was going to be full of athletes to be able to push me and get me to where I needed to be. I mean, as a high school athlete, I always had great partners, always had great opportunities to not always be the best one in the room. And I wanted to make sure that that was the case. So I went out to Colorado Springs, lived out there, trained out there for a little bit. And then when Northern Michigan announced that they had their program, was really exciting. 1, because it's back home in Michigan. And then 2, being able to still live that same lifestyle that we were getting at the training center in Colorado over at Northern Michigan at that training center, but also being able to be a student and get my degree was super important. And so making that transition, I think was a great opportunity for me to be able to tackle both at the same time. The training center out in Colorado is not conducive for students. So we were just out there just training. So the really nice thing is we were able to bring in so many high level athletes at the same time. So you mentioned Mary Kelly already a few times. Mary Kelly came in at the same time. Liz Short, we had Mena, which was one of the ones that was on your list for Fargo champion. Brandy Miller was out there at the time. So we had the opportunity to make a room with a lot of really high level competitive athletes already. I want to say our first year at Northern Michigan, we won as a team junior trials, which was really exciting. So, having all those athletes in one place was definitely the draw to go out to Northern.
When you sit back and look at it's been, now we're coming into our 6th quad. 04 was the first one. Then it took Helen in 16 to get that Olympic gold. And then we've had multiple medalists now, Clarissa, won some medals. We've got Adeline got her medal. Helen's won a 2nd medal. When you look back at Rio, let's kind of jump ahead and what Helen's moment meant for women's wrestling. I guess for you, put that moment into words to watch her have accomplished it, and then to do it by beating Sarah Yoshida as well.
Right. So I think that moment in wrestling helped to highlight, I think, to the wrestling community, kind of like the same thing you said about Olympic trials, where the crowd is roaring and you kind of look over and you realize it's for a match that 2 females are wrestling. I think the match with Helen and her performance allowed a lot of people in the wrestling community to go, oh, wow, like they don't just show up, but they actually know how to perform. They're peak level athletes. They understand and really get the sport of wrestling. I would love to fight anybody on the conversation of Helen at that time was pound for pound the best athlete at that event, male or female. And I think that's what she was able to do with that event, is just show the level that female wrestling is at, and that we can rise to that occasion. There's no difference. We can learn all the same things. So I really feel like that was what happened in that moment.
And we look back in Tokyo with Tamira Mensah-Stock becoming a real media darling, just because if anybody's ever met Tamira, they just know how bright, bubbly, and just amazing she is as a human being. she's a product of, again, Helen did a lot of the elite training and also went through the Northern Michigan, then MOBAP, then trained specifically up in freestyle program at Simon Fraser in Canada, which has had a women's program for a while as well. But Tamira came through our college system and really developed in college, and then went, kind of did that almost that men's style of progression going through college, and then in getting better after college, even though the styles are different. But the opportunities for the schools to be represented, so Wayland Baptist can sit there and flag, hey, we've got Olympic. They developed an Olympic champion at their school, and this is an opportunity that's happening at colleges all over the country now. King University, a Division II school in Bristol, Tennessee, on that Virginia borderline. I know they kind of claim Tennessee. I don't know. It's a Virginia thing to me. But anyway, we look at the athletes that have come through in these schools that embrace women's wrestling early, get an opportunity to say, hey, these are our athletes, and it puts those schools on the map. You're at a school, a Division II institution with varsity women's wrestling, going to host a D1 showcase quad this weekend. This will be the first ever dual meet between two Division I schools. Presbyterian, right down the road in Clinton, South Carolina, is coming your way, along with Sacred Heart from up in Connecticut. And then there's going to be kind of I don't know if the term all-star is apt, but a bridge the divide team that's been put together of women's athletes that are at Columbia, Princeton, Fordham, all sorts of schools that are looking to maybe branch off and create women's wrestling teams. And the point is to showcase to these schools, hey, look, there are athletes here. You can have a team. You can be formidable. So I guess talk about maybe the development of how the college system has really helped, not just the depth of wrestling in this country, but also help the medal count and help the ability for people like yourself to now, hey, I had that dream. I had the opportunity to pursue that. Now there's girls behind me that are never not going to know they didn't have that chance.
I definitely think that being able to have these large wrestling rooms now where you're seeing, I was like King, McKendree, Limestone, North Central, all these programs where you have some of the best young ladies in the country all training together in the same space definitely helps with our depth. Being able to come in and perform at freestyle and have kind of that developmental age as well. So these young ladies, they do Scholastic, they go through their high school programs. Most of them are doing folk style. They're getting freestyle in the off season, maybe some training clubs. Otherwise, they go and compete at a few events throughout the season, but don't get that ability to fully develop. Well, that was kind of what we did back in the day, the same idea, but then we would move on and you're right into the senior level. There wasn't an opportunity to kind of have like that intermittent next level change with some coaches that really know what they're doing to get you to where you need to go to be on the senior level. So I think with, some better coaches out here with these athletes, being able to develop them from being a high school athlete now to a college athlete, that later on in their college years, it's so much easier to develop to the next level. And so I think that's definitely going to continue to contribute to the depth and medal counts and things like that for our athletes to be able to go high school, get that college experience, level up, and then be able to move on and perform at the senior level. That transition, I think, becomes a lot easier and a little bit more efficient along the way as well.
You're sitting in a position as a female coach of a female program. This is something that, as we grow with more women's programs, is becoming more of an option. We often hear the differences between men and women, and a lot of the men's wrestling side of things don't really know how the brain of a woman's wrestler ticks. We know how some of the brains of wrestlers tick, but as far as being a female athlete coming through, how important is just the presence of a female coach? Not just for you maybe as an athlete, but now that you have that presence on athletes that they may have never had one before. I mean, talk about what that dynamic is like to coach other women that are wrestling in this sport.
I think it's very empowering to be able to lead females to be strong females. I think for us at Limestone, that's a core value that we work on is if our coaching staff are good mentors, then we help to develop young women that are good mentors along the way as well. I think with women leading other women, it's kind of the same idea as women in science, right? So we're told that, it's hard to get women into science because they see more men as science teachers or in that field. But when young girls get to see women in those fields, then they feel like they can do it too. Being in those leadership roles when they see women and have women around them that are in those leadership roles, and they feel like they can be leaders as well. So I think it's very important. A lot of our women love it. A lot of them are some of them are hesitant at first. They're like, well, I've never been coached by, a female before. This is going to be new. I'm like, you guys, it really isn't that much different. I grew up being coached by men. I never had any female coaches when it came to wrestling, but I did in other sports. My dance instructors were females. My softball coaches were females. So this isn't anything new. It's just really nice to have in our sport so that wrestlers that get all these amazing values that we talk so much about becoming leaders in their fields, that they can be strong women because they've been able to see it as they go through their college career.
I'll talk about this event a little bit, which is unique because you've got the first Division I teams meeting each other in a dual meet. As this is the first year Sacred Heart's on the mat. Presbyterian's been a team for a couple years now, but Limestone's a Division II institution, and you're hosting this thing. So kind of an interesting dynamic when you look at it, just at least in the title.
No, definitely. So we definitely never turned down the challenge. So Coach Brandy was our assistant coach the last 2 years previous to Coach Lindsay stepping up for us this year. She came to me with an idea. She's like, you know what we need to do? We need to figure out a way to highlight Division I women's wrestling. We have a lot of these young ladies that are out here sacrificing their wrestling careers in college to be able to grow the sport of women's wrestling at these Division I schools. So these young ladies like Chloe over at Princeton is truly making sacrifices, not being on a women's team for the good of women's wrestling. And so we definitely, cheers to her for what she's doing out there. But it's going to provide opportunities in the future. So basically what her idea is to bring these young ladies together so that they can, one, have the experience, but two, it's a good selling point. Like, we're going out, we were able to compete. We did these things against these other programs. Can we get a club team? Can we get a varsity team? What options do we have to be able to grow it at our own institution? So it was really important there. And then to elevate it, it made the most sense to make it a Division I event. And so, like I said, Coach Randy and I definitely love challenges. So we're like, let's go for it. So that's when we went ahead and reached out to Sacred Heart. We reached out to Presbyterian. And then the Division I women's wrestling group with Lori, Jackie, Emma, and Kara, and started getting on calls to put it together. And it's been very exciting to see it. I mean, like you said, we have young ladies coming in from Princeton, Columbia, Drexel, things like that. I mean, that's such a great opportunity to showcase our growth in our sport. And you have a choice. You can either keep the sport stale and where it's at, or you can be the reason it continues to elevate. And for me, we want to continue to show how to elevate what we're doing and not just kind of be in the backseat, but actually drive the car.
We've got our first Power 5 announced, and, because, Presbyterian was the first women's program, followed by Sacred Heart. Now, Iowa announced, and Clarissa Chun will be the head coach there. Program starting officially their first competitive season, 2023-24. And sitting in a Division II chair, again, there is no divisions within women's wrestling just yet, other than the NAIA and the NCAA, which is, you also have to spend some time educating people on what those things are, because for the formation of women's college wrestling, the power structure has been back and forth. I mean, we've had Oklahoma City really had a good run there for a minute. Simon Fraser, which had a women's team at what's the Canadian division, the U Sport, which is it's now called. They came in when the school reclassified to NCAA Division II, and then you've King and has been a Division II power, McKendree, and we've got Life at the NAI. I mean, there Campbell's. I mean, there are some. There's a real split. Where is the power? It seems to go back and forth between who the power teams are, and we're soon going to see a split in terms of where athletes are going to go, and that's going to eventually come with the NCAA Division I, Division II, Division III. Where you sit at a Division II institution as an emerging sport, there are opportunities that Limestone's going to have to elevate its program in women's wrestling that most other schools won't have with their wrestling team. So talk about the unique opportunity, the emerging sports status is for Limestone as a Division II school, the opportunity to compete with Division I Power 5 institutions in this program's future.
Well, I think it's amazing. Like when I think it's just my personality. Like I want everything to be at the highest level possible, right? So when I'm training my athletes, I'm trying to train them at the highest level possible. When we do events, we try to do the best events. Unfortunately, I'm hardwired that way. It makes life a little hard sometimes. But when you have that end result, it's really cool. So having the opportunity to compete against the highest level and having athletes prepared and ready for that. Right now at women's wrestling, it's not going to matter if you're a Division II or Division III or Division I athlete. You're still pulling them in because we all compete together. What I think is really cool is to start off once we go from emerging sport to official, then to my knowledge, it's Division I that picks it up. So it's really exciting to know that although we're a Division II institution, until some of them start to split off, we're all going to compete under the umbrella of Division I athletics. And then you have Lock Haven, that is a Division II school, but their men's wrestling program is Division I. And so we're really hoping that once we kind of get to that point, that we can have a push to say, hey, are we a team that should be competing Division II, or can we do a petition similar to what they've done and try to keep our compliance on board and hope that we stay a Division I program? Obviously, a lot of that's going to fall on our administration at that point, but our goal is to continue to try to stay as an elevated program so that we can get to that point. I mean, we just hit top 15 in the country, and we had our freshman first year, a COVID year, and this is year 2 for us as a season. So, you know, I tell people, watch out. We're on a mission right now to be one of the best programs in the country.
And again, the growth of women's wrestling has been coming at that sub-Division I level. We saw the NAIA really, and you spent time at Ottawa and at Lyon in the NAIA before coming to Limestone. And, you know, the dynamics of the schools within Division II in the NAIA, they're very, very comparable, a lot of small private liberal arts colleges and such. But explain how you cut your teeth in coaching under guys like Kevin Andres and Tom Erickson in the NAIA that's kind of helped you, you know, get your footing with your first head coaching job at Limestone.
I think with any assistant coaching position, you learn how to be an assistant. You figure out, you know, where your place is and how to function in that realm. I mean, with Tom Erickson, a great mentor. He one heck of a technician. It was awesome to be able to see how he ran a program and just kind of help accent what he was doing we were doing over there. You learn how to recruit, that's for sure, because that was, I think, 90% of my job was bringing in athletes. And I mean, even as a head coach, that's 90% of what you do is trying to bring in the talent so that you can be a successful program. So I think having the opportunity to be an assistant for a few years and just kind of take the back seat, see the things that need to happen. You know, all of us, we make mistakes along the way. We improve, we make it better. So it was nice to watch because I actually helped build both programs, both the first Ottawa. We recruited our first season and then competed. And then at Lyon, they had one season. So then it was still a rebuilding season, season 2. So it was just a lot of great opportunities to figure out how to build a program and what that looks like. And over at Lyon, I think is where I learned most on the right ways to get all that done for sure. Say that would be the best explanation on that one.
Of course, you talked about recruiting. You get to go creative with recruiting because you're trying to pull people into Ottawa, Kansas, into Batesville, Arkansas, and now Gaffney, South Carolina. I'm not sure how much the Big Peach helps with recruiting in Gaffney, but I understand it's quite the tourism draw.
So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was funny at first. I'm like, how do I tell somebody to come to Arkansas? Like, who goes to Arkansas? So we did. I mean, we were able to. I mean, even in Kansas, you're kind of like flatlands, not a whole lot going on. But the universities definitely made a difference in bringing in and drawing people in. Limestone, on the other hand, like people like the idea of South Carolina. They definitely think of beaches and palm trees and nice weather. Our weather is amazing most of the year. So it definitely helps draw it in. I mean, we're a tiny little town close to some bigger cities. So you can kind of balance a little bit of that along the way. But I would say it's a heck of a lot easier to bring people into South Carolina than it was a little town in Kansas and a little town in Arkansas.
Yeah, one thing that where your previous stops have is you've been in the corner for men's tournaments too. I remember running into you at the NAI National Championships, and you're coaching at the national tournament, and like That brings a different dynamic. Is a woman now not just coaching, a woman coaching men? Talk about that experience a little bit.
I miss it. I absolutely enjoy the dynamic of folk style wrestling. I absolutely love the dynamic differences in coaching men versus women. Um, it, it, it's there's a lot of similarities, obviously, but there are a lot of differences in it. But it was interesting because you get a lot of pats on the shoulder, like you're doing a good job, and I'm like, wait, I did a bad job. Like, what do you mean? Like, no, I know I'm all right. I'm good. I don't, you know what I mean? So that's always interesting. I hear a lot. Like, I think I got, I walk around in my heels at big tournaments. So I think that's always an eye catcher too. But I absolutely enjoy cornering our men, and they loved it. I never had any hiccups along the way coaching any of the men that I did on the college level. I mean, wrestling's wrestling, so a single leg's a single leg. It's no different if it's men's wrestling or women's wrestling. But I'm sure it was a sight to see, because even then, I mean, even now, I think we've only had one female that's been heading a program, and that was Delgado. Right now, I think she's an interim over there in Colorado.
Central Methodist, Missouri.
Central Methodist, yeah. Thank you.
There's a couple CMUs out there. It's not the Colorado Mesa, it's the Central Methodist. Yeah.
So, but it does take a different level, because people are gonna notice, people are gonna say things, people are gonna have their opinions about the actions and how you lead a team. But I do miss it. I still like to coach the boys around here when I can. Private lessons, things like that. It's kind of nice to still have that dynamic with the boys side of it and the men's side of it as well.
And looking at the makeup of having both programs, Ashley Sword, Flavin has now, I have to drop her married name on there, just like I have yours. I still know you as Brandy Rosenbrock. I'm sorry. It's just forces of habit that are, your name's been different for quite a while. I need to get over it. So it's talk about like when you hire coaches, she talks about Omi Acosta. He's not expected to coach her team. She's not expected to coach his team. There is a split, and sometimes when you have shared staffs, sometimes the strain can come out there on how you make sure that you're making enough time for both sets of athletes and being fair and being responsible. And it, obviously hiring a women's head coach to run the women's program at Limestone is a step in that right direction for as a blueprint that schools, I believe, should be following is hiring, separate coaches when you start programs, because a lot of these schools are starting men's and women's programs at the same time. What's it been like to work at Limestone now, knowing that this is your program? I don't have to coach the men's side. You say you miss it, but like to know that my focus is my women, my program.
It definitely makes things a lot easier. Like going from like 4 hours of practice a day, you lose 2 hours. And so 2 hours that you can be spending scouting, recruiting, video review, nutrition talks, whatever it might be, you miss out on those opportunities. So being able to just focus on the women's team here, like that was one of the most important things. So when I interviewed, I was very adamant on the fact that like this has to be this way. And they were too. Like, I think our administration was absolutely amazing. They chose to bring on women's wrestling. It wasn't an outside source that came in and encouraged them to do so. But I was very adamant on the fact that it's got to be separate programs. Like, we can't function together at the same time, not shared practices, not shared, coaching staff, because at that time, like, they were only hiring a head coach because we were just in a recruiting section to start. And then, when it was time that we would hire another assistant coach that's just strictly for the women's team. And I love the fact that they were definitely on board with that. But it allows you to have so much better focus, because although styles are similar, when you're making sure that you're staying up on men's wrestling and you're staying up on women's wrestling, and even now I go to watch a folk style match and I'm like, it's funny to watch somebody do a standout, because you're like, oh, don't do that, don't. I'm like, wait, that you're supposed to. So having to change that all throughout your day, and making sure that your time is, and then your time is divided by, double the athletes. And so that, I think, can be really tough too. So being able to have, just we have 24 athletes right now. Our cap, I think, is about 30, 35, and that's it. It really makes it easy to grow and develop your team. And it gives them their own voice too. So I think when you have one coach that runs two programs, they don't have their own identity, and I think it's important to that these programs also have their own identity. The men's team and the women's team um, kind of get to work, and then you know who's coaching you. Like, I remember going, okay, well, you're going with the men this weekend, and the men's coach or the head coach goes with the women. It's like you never have to question it. You know what your coaches are going to be. You know who's going to be there for you as well. And I definitely feel like that's the way we need to be going. We have to get to the point where we are hiring separate staffs for these teams because it's going to be the best for the growth on both sides. Because no matter what, you're right, it's going to take a hit on one side or the other.
There it is. Along with that vein, what resources other than mats are shared between the men's and women's program at Limestone?
I mean, other than mats, I mean, your practice, I mean, obviously it's your practice room that you end up sharing. So it's a balance between times. Open mat time can get a little interesting sometimes. But I think other than that, I mean, for us, we have the same strength and conditioning coaches, but we have different times. We have, the same athletic trainer, but they come, at different times as well. So, I mean, other than sharing a space, when we're separate programs, it makes it really nice because that it is what it is. It's like soccer and lacrosse. They share a field, but other than that, everything's separate.
Now, my question is what are programmatic goals for the administration? Because a lot of people look at women's wrestling and men's wrestling, as we've seen the growth at the Division II, Division III, the NAI level specifically, as enrollment drivers. Now, typically, women aren't the population that they're trying to bring onto campuses anymore because there's a lot more women attending college and men in large. But when you get the job at Limestone, what are their goals and what are your goals for them? Obviously, fill a roster and be successful, but what does that actually mean? What's the measure of success for a women's wrestling program at Limestone?
So I would say, I mean, it's going to be different for everybody, right? So for my administration, it's going to be us performing athletically. It's going to be us performing in the classroom. It's going to be us, live in the Division II model, which is obviously academics first. In Division II, community service is a big part. So I was at Make-A-Wish Foundation is one of the ones that we work closely with. And so being able to give back to the community is important. But when it comes to like us as a program, the important things are, definitely getting them their degree, seeing them grow on the wrestling mat. So success in the wrestling room can be tough sometimes to see. And I tell them the reason why it's hard to see is because we're all growing together. So it takes until we're getting on the mat and competing to see where that true growth is. But for us in our program, it's measured in how they're interacting with each other as a team. How they're performing in the classroom, how they're performing obviously in the community too, because that's one of our core values for just our team as well. And ultimately the success is shown in hands that are raised as you move forward. So it may start off the season with hey, I haven't gotten a takedown, to I got a takedown on an athlete that we've been scouting, to getting to regionals, and now we're winning that match. So it may not be, hey, we're an All-American yet, but it's those little steps along the way to try to measure where our success is.
Going to bring John another good question that's coming up on the screen. Drop it here. By sharing trainers and strength and conditioning coaches as well as facilities, does it assist with budgets in terms of being able to do more, considering wrestling programs are known for typically doing more with less at a lot of places?
So I would say, yeah, it definitely helps, that we share a strength and conditioning coach. It helps that we share and athletic training, but all programs do across the board. So we're fortunate enough that we have a separate operational budget. We get an opportunity to fill out our schedule each season. I absolutely love Limestone's model when it comes to gear and the things that we get as teams. we get the same treatment as football does, or men's lacrosse is what is probably the most competitive on our campus. And there's no differences in the things that we get. So I think that helps athletes across the board, especially at a Division II level, because sometimes that's not the case. Even Division I, you'll see some of the teams that are highlighted a little bit more kind of get a little bit more. So although we have some of those shared things, our operational budget is separate, and we can function as we need to on our own. And then our we all get the same amount of gear. It all looks different. We need our spandex, and the guys get their athletic shorts. But I think that would be the best way to say how Limestone does it for us.
Bringing this back to what we've got coming up this weekend. So to set this one up, we're going to go back 20 years and look at the landscape of college wrestling now as if you were a high school senior. Just kind of explain the opportunities that the young women have coming out of high school now compared to what you had, and what you would do with such opportunities today.
Oh, it's crazy. So obviously when I started, there were, like, you didn't get recruited because there really weren't many programs to go to. And
I think you had what? University of the Cumberlands, Mo Valley, Menlo, Pacific, Morris, I think was still a program when you were coming out, I think, but that was pretty much it. And then Northern when they started. I think that was what we had at the time, right?
Yeah, that's it. So there weren't very many options at that time. And so it was very limited. So even when you did, most of the time you were competing at senior events anyway. So, Menlo and University of Cumberland aren't going to compete against each other unless they're going to a tournament altogether, because that's a huge expense to be able to travel that far just for a duel. And so they all basically trained, did a few dual meets along the way, and then you went to senior events. You went to the Sunkist Open. You went to the New York AC, cadet or junior and U23 trials, to now where we drive 2 hours and we can duel 6 different teams. So it is a huge difference to be able to be just college athletes. I tried when we built our program, I really tried to reflect back on, okay, so I was a high level athlete, super competitive. What kind of team would I need and what would I want? So when we were building our team, we were looking at athletes that were super gritty, that were going to come in, be coachable, but weren't necessarily, like, to me, to bring in 2 girls that are number 1 to a team that's not ready for them yet, I felt like it was a disservice. So we were very intentional on, when we were building our program, what that was going to look like. And I think it's hit and miss. I think everybody wants the number 1 program to start, but it's not how it works. Rome wasn't built overnight. So, like, our catchphrase right now is build the empire. It takes little baby steps along the way to get there. And so our first season, that's what we really focused on. And now we're to the point where we are working to get those high level athletes in, because we have a room that they deserve to be in. Our athletes train at an extremely high level. And so it really is a lot different, having those opportunities. And I'm working with one of our young ladies here in South Carolina, and I'm like, you needed to narrow this down last year, because it's too late to narrow it down now, because you have over 100 programs to choose from. So quit adding, like, you got to stop and just make a decision, because if not, you can just keep going for forever before you decide what you want to do.
And now looking back at your career, you competed in you won a title at the very first Fargo. You wrestled at the very first women's Olympic team trials. Now you were going to be the host institution for the very first event involving 2 Division I schools going to wrestle each other in women's wrestling. Have you kind of wrapped your head around the impact of what's going to be happening on February 5th?
I guess I didn't look at it quite like that, but it is really exciting to continue to kind of be a pioneer of what's going on. Definitely hats off to Ashley on being the first female to win a team national championship. But I have my vision board here to be the first female coach to win a national title, for an individual title. And so that's our mission right now. And I keep it in here, and we talk about it as a team, that's what we're moving towards. But it's really cool to be able to continue, even, 20 some years later, being in the sport, to still be able to host and be part of some of those firsts.
Yeah, and we look at it just for those interested, 8 o'clock. It's going to kick off early, Limestone and the Bridge to the Divide group. So you're going to get the conglomeration of athletes. Let's see if I can quickly pull up some of those names that, we mentioned a couple of them. It disappeared for me for a second. Here, I got it up on the screen. I was actually prepared. Or was I? No, that's my wife's text messages, not yours. Okay, so people. These are names that people that follow wrestling would know. They know Chloe Ayers, they know Caitlin Walker, but other names: Dorothy West from Drexel, Zoe Podesky, MIT, and NYU. There's some Division III schools that are also involved here. It's not just Division I. Marisol Nugent is on the roster at University of North Carolina. Several wrestlers from Columbia. Got a wrestler from Fordham. So this is part of that Bridge to the Divide team. That is going to be at 8 o'clock, and then Presbyterian and Sacred Heart. And I want to give the tip of the cap on this one to Michael Smoose, the SID at Sacred Heart University, who emailed me talking to me about, hey, how can we promote this? And I'm like, wait a minute, what? I'm going to be in Roanoke this weekend. I'm driving to Gaffney on Friday night to be up there 8 a.m. for that first one. So I'm actually going to be there too. So I'm pretty excited about it. And Brandy, thank you for giving me the information on that. 9:30 Limestone and Sacred Heart, and then Presbyterian Bridge of the Divide before Limestone wrestles Presbyterian at 11. So we've got a 3 rounds of wrestling. If you're in the Charlotte area, Gaffney's not that far outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. So if you need geography lessons, and if you want to see some wrestling history unfold, I would suggest maybe making it an early Saturday morning and getting to Gaffney, South Carolina. Just look for the Big Peach. You'll be close. So that's a lot to take in here this weekend.
Well, we appreciate you getting us some people out here. Unfortunately, we have to stay live for this event with the landscape we're still at. Unfortunately, they put it in as a closed event. We were hoping to be an open event by then, but numbers, unfortunately, still where they're at. They're going to limit it to support staff. So we unfortunately just had to send that email out today to let everybody know.
Oh, so beforehand, I was hoping. Okay, so all right.
we were working to. Our goal was. Our very first home match that we had. Our gym was standing room only. There wasn't a seat left, and we were hoping to try to do the same thing again for this event. But unfortunately, we had to send it out that. Landscapes haven't changed yet, so we got to keep our athletes as safe as possible. So,
all right, well, that's good to know. So, Brandy, anything else that we need to know about this event this weekend, other than that knowledge bomb you've dropped right there, or the Limestone Women's Wrestling Program? Feel free to drop it now, because we've got a lot of history with women's wrestling and just knowing each other and following each other's careers for years that we could probably go on for another hour or two, but we can do that on our own time.
No, I think so obviously we're here trying to do the right thing and build a program to make these athletes proud of. We work really hard to give them that great student athlete environment. Our goal is to keep a good, safe, healthy environment for our athletes, trying to push them as hard as they can to be the best they can, both on and off the mat, I think is priority for us. And so, if you haven't made any decisions yet, we're still looking to add a couple more to our roster this year. Actually, we're super excited because this will be the first time we're being extremely selective on who we want to bring in and what type of talent we want to bring in, and actually only looking to add maybe 5 or 6 to our roster this season.
All right, you might have remembered her as Brandy Rosenbach when she was winning double titles in Fargo back in 2002, 2003, the head women's coach at Limestone University. Brandy Green, good luck this weekend. Good luck with the event, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You have a great day.